The art for today's episode is not related to the podcast I will be talking about, and as always, Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
Iris. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped out of the car. The summer air hung dead and limp upon my shoulders like a heavy blanket as I made my way up to the temple at the top of the cliff. Gravel crunched loudly under my feet. The leafy trees around me stood motionless in the thick, still air, festooned with luckless windsocks, downed kites, immobile pinwheels, and other offerings left by desperate worshippers. Something bad had happened at the Temple of Wind. It was my job to find out just how bad. A hand-lettered sign taped to the gates indicated the temple was closed for a private ceremony. That in itself was a bad sign. Estros was never big on privacy, not for himself nor his priesthood. I pushed the intercom button, glancing up at the security camera perched on top of the entrance. The voice that crackled through the speakers managed to sound both bored and anxious.
In a world where gods and goddesses hold power, Justice Iris finds herself with a case that puts one god as her prime suspect. With the help of a demigod down on his luck, the two of them dig deep into a case that will lead them to getting too close to higher powers for comfort. Gods and Lies is a fantasy detective podcast set in a fantastical world where gods walk among people. The show is 14 episodes with 2 seasons, each one following its own storyline. So this show, definitely with the release of the Percy Jackson show, if you like that show, I think you would like this one, because although this isn't very much a Greek gods show, it feels very much like Greek mythology inspired. It just has that vibes of it, and a lot of the narration of it reminds me too of the Silt Verses, which is nice. I really like long monologue podcasts that do really good monologues, and because the point of view is in 2 characters, then it's just done really good. And I just really like the characters for the show. It's not a very long one. It's only 14 episodes. Each season's only 7 episodes. You get a nice good chunk out of it, and I do wish there was more of it, because there's only 14 episodes, and it's been a while since season 2 came out. I'm not really sure if they're continuing with the season 3, and if they are, I'm not sure when that's coming out, but I would like to see it if they are planning on doing it. Although season 2 does leave off on a nice place, so it does wrap up very nicely if you are worried about a chapter multiverse situation where it ends on a cliffhanger. It doesn't. It definitely ends on a spot where it's okay, well, if they stop the show here, it's not an Infinity Train, season 3 of Infinity Train situation where a bunch of arcs are not finished. I will always forever be salty about Infinity Train getting canceled. And it's just great. One of the things I do wish with just my only biggest critique with the show is that there's not more of it. Literally that's it, because the society of the show and the world that they're set in is very interesting, very much with just how strict it is while also how unstrict it is. A lot of the human characters talk about with the way society is structured to favor gods and demigods more so than regular people, and how the gods are run by 3 bigger, higher gods, and it's very interesting with how they go about with it. And as well as when the second season introduces the idea of it being harder for new gods to become a god of something because there's so many gods who are gods of something. And I find that something really fascinating that I wish we could see a bit more of. That's my biggest critique, is I just want to see more of the show, and I want to see more of how the society is. And I kind of want to see more of just different stuff involving the human characters rather than just based on heavily on the god characters. So I think that would be very interesting, especially when they introduce stuff like nymphs and centaurs and things like that. It's I want to see the smaller society stuff. And it has your general topics that you find in a detective story. There's nothing super much gore, not a lot of super high triggering content that I normally would tag for, a lot of gore and stuff. There is an amnesia storyline in the second story that I don't know if people will be really upset about, but that's something you're sensitive to, of like people having their memories taken away from them against their will. That's a thing, but nothing like super extreme with like some other podcasts I have talked about. And overall, I just really enjoyed this show. One of the things I like about it is it's mostly focused on the two main characters whose names are Iris and Andy. Andy's the demigod I mentioned in like the little blurb at the beginning of it, but they just like have such a great dynamic together. It's very much a like femme fatale and a detective kind of thing, but like, you know, gender swapped, so female detective and male femme fatale. I don't know if Andy would 100% count as a femme fatale, but he definitely has like the vibes of it. And just like another thing with it is I like to like switch between the inner monologues of Justix Iris as well as switching to Andy's inner monologue, because you could definitely get like an idea of like what both of the characters are thinking. And it's just an interesting way that they do it, rather than only focusing on just like one character through the whole show. And it's just like an interesting thing that they do, and it's a good dynamic. And like I said, this is a show with a lot of like really interesting world building when involving like human god relationships, as well as just like how society works around with gods, and like how god society works around itself. And how they're like, even though the gods are like definitely a lot better treated in society than like regular people are, they there's definitely some kind of hierarchy in place based around different deities. And I just find that interesting. I kind of would like to see more of it, but I also would like to see more of just like non-god based stuff in this god-filled world, and I think it's cool. This is definitely, like I said earlier, that the like narration of this reminds me a lot of the Silverses. This is like a happier Silverses. Except society still is very much based off classism in this setting. And so yeah, I just wish I wish that the show was a bit longer. I just would like more of the show. If you're definitely want something that's like not another mythology retelling, but something that feels very akin to like a Greek mythology kind of storyline, I would say this would be the show for you. My best friend recommended me the show because he loves detective stuff, and I gave it a listen during a long car ride, and I was like, wow, yeah, he's right, this is really good. So yeah, if you're listening to this, creators of Gods and Lies, I would like more Gods and Lies, please, if that's something that you guys want to do in the future. Please, hi. Anyway, that's all I have for this one. I know it's not a very long episode, but like I said, it's not a very long show. The whole thing is just very interesting. It's like, first storyline is like a detective mystery one, and the other one is like detective murder mystery one. The second one is like, oh yeah, there's a murder, but not quite in the way of like how a murder usually is. So overall, good show, great show. Please go give it a listen, and I will be linking to all social. I always do that. I always say this at the end of every show. You're gonna expect it. I'm gonna be linking to social medias. I'm gonna be linking to the group that does the show if they have any social medias. This is like one of those few times where I haven't looked up previously if they have any social medias, but if it's linked down below, you know I found it later. And as always, if you have a suggestion for a podcast for me to listen to, leave the suggestion, and I will recommend another show and tell you guys about another podcast that I am listening to. And if you like me, but you don't want to always follow me on just YouTube, you can follow me everywhere else, because I have other social media sites. They are linked down below. I have a webcomic. Go read it. In Harmony comic on Tapas. Go give it a listen. Read. You don't listen to comics, you read them. Anyway, I hope you have a good day, and I will talk to you later.